Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the innovators and leaders of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Grow With Us podcast highlights in-Tulsa talent's work of bridging Tulsa talent with tech opportunities and the revolutionary work around the city. In-Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. On this episode of Grow With Us, we are in conversation with Matt Carney, the executive director of Root. We discuss the origin of Root, the insider's guide to Tulsa, how content and tech can facilitate community engagement through event discovery, and the awesome guides and Tulsa-based content available on roottulsa.com. Matt, I'm super grateful to have you on this episode of Grow With Us. This conversation is going to be great. I can't wait.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it, Evan. Yeah, it's good to be here, and let's get started.
Yeah, I reached out to you and have really heard about you kind of in this ecosystem through being in our office as one way that we've kind of connected more on a personal note than just like strangers in the downtown wind of Tulsa.
Yeah, I think you showed up to the big open public hearings that the Downtown Tulsa Partnership had for the bridge.
Yes, Center of the Universe.
Yes, yeah.
So that was such an interesting conversation. I hope something's come from that.
yeah. I'm excited for that one. It's such an important little corridor connecting, of these disparate pieces of downtown, but also, a center for public art. Yeah. And it's on Tulsa King and like...
Oh, yeah. All of the history, like little pieces that we got from that conversation. I was like, this is cool. And like, I hope that everybody realizes how important this is.
Yeah. And Tulsa has a lot of places like that once you like really... when you actually sit down and scrutinize it, it's like, oh yeah, this is connected to everything else in all these funny, weird ways.
Yeah, I really appreciated that conversation and hope it goes somewhere. But kind of back to you and kind of getting us started in this conversation, I'd love for you to, just introduce yourself and tell us your story in whatever way you feel comfortable.
Oh yeah. Well, I was born here, grew up here, never lived anywhere else before I left for college in 2008. But yeah, I graduated from Metro Christian Academy and went to Union High School as well. I have memories of my parents taking me to Mayfest, downtown back when, before they bulldozed that really cool, like mid-century modern fountain that was like right in the middle of downtown, if you remember that. Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm a little older than you are. But yeah, I just have all these great memories of growing up here and go and participating in like kind of public Tulsa life to some degree, but also like I'm sure you had similar experience going to school here. Like a lot of people who grew up in Tulsa do like want to leave.
Yeah,
and that was maybe more pronounced. I'm 34. So when I was in high school, I heard that a lot, but I never necessarily like agreed with that sentiment. I was like, I like it here. Tulsa's fine, but I also didn't feel super strongly either way.
Yeah, 50-50 for me too. It was like I heard other people share that sentiment when it was shared, and also the same on the other end when it was shared that they wanted to stay. So
yeah, and it's ironic now too, because a lot of those friends in my cohort growing up who struck off to Chicago or LA or whatever. If they're trying to buy a house or have kids, like they're coming back.
Yeah.
It seems like every couple of months I hear about some friend of mine from high school who found their way back to Tulsa finally. But
I love that. Honestly, that's like I think I'm holding out for that a little bit because a lot of people I was really close with, like actually, like I feel like loved Tulsa, and just kind of went on for. Whether it was opportunity or just the institutions they were headed to, and then those institutions connecting them to their opportunities that might not have been here. But I think I can go to all those people and be like, you're working in this field. There's actually this thing in Tulsa now. Like, and they don't even know because they've been in their own other world, which is so fair. Sure. They'll come back when it's time for them.
We all find our way back to Tulsa in time.
Exactly.
In our time. But yeah, so I graduated from high school here in 2007, and went to the University of Oklahoma where I studied journalism, and then worked in newspapers in Oklahoma City from about 2011 to 2016. I worked for the Gazette, which was the alt-weekly paper in Oklahoma City, and then for the Oklahoman, which was the daily newspaper. So I did a lot of different work in my time at both of those publications, but mainly I was focused on features and specifically music. Like I've always had a great passion for the music scene, just broadly in Oklahoma, specifically in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. There's a ton of like really, really interesting rural music scene stuff going on all over the state as well. I don't want that to get overlooked. Yeah. When I moved over to work for the daily newspaper, the Oklahoman, I became kind of more of like a digital editor where I was kind of keeping up our web traffic. We were doing 30 million page views a month, give or take.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of news. A lot of pulling stuff off the vendor wires and helping our readers both like on the app and on the website. Find out what was happening and learn the information that they needed to navigate their world. Some days that's kind of as like surface level as the Thunder acquiring a new player via trade or whatever. And some days it's really heavy, big political news or what have you. But so yeah, I worked there until about 2016 and just got to work with a lot of really accomplished journalists. People who'd covered the Oklahoma City bombing, I was colleagues with them, and they had incredible perspectives both on the city of Oklahoma City itself, but journalism and the day-to-day work of what it means to uncover information and bring it to an audience. So, and then at the same time, it was a really interesting time to work there because the industry was declining. Yeah. There were layoffs every year, but I was kind of seeing like, well, how can I take the skills and the experiences that I've had in this profession and translate them into other industries, into the community, because so much of like that daily journalism work is like community oriented work.
Yeah.
Kind of connecting people with their city, with their culture, and with each other. So when I was hired in, I believe it was spring 2016 or 2017 now, to move back home to do Root here in Tulsa, I brought a lot of that experience with me, and yeah, it's just been I've been here for 6 years now, and it's a blast every day.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate that story. And one thing I wanted to kind of touch on just with your journalism background is it feels like you were really situated in a really interesting time where I feel like a lot of the world, and I don't want this to really go down like too much of a rabbit hole, but just like where the world kind of distrusted and created a lot of distrust for media, and even news and the newspaper being a big part of that. So I feel like it's really, I'm sure you had an interesting perspective on kind of how that happened, how that affected, maybe the layoffs and kind of the industry declining as a whole, but it's so interesting to kind of think about that lens on how we receive information with how people trust it or not trust it too. So
yeah, one of the things like I think a lot of people don't realize about the media industry is how important like classified ads were and just like advertising in general. Because that's like why these like legacy media brands, with a few exceptions, the New York Times is doing pretty well, the Los Angeles Times is doing pretty well, the Washington Post, because they have the luxury of covering like these internationally important areas of the world. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma City and Tulsa, we have impact in the energy industry, but beyond that,
Yeah, I was gonna say they also have billionaire backers.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, when Facebook came through and introduced Facebook Marketplace, and when Craigslist came through, it just killed off what was really steady revenue streams particularly for like local newspapers for a really long time in those classified ads. So
that's interesting. I didn't even think about that being the marketplace disruptor was those types of technology. That's interesting.
Yeah, and when you're not pulling in steady revenue, you can't employ journalists, and so you saw those newsrooms, especially in rural areas, and especially in smaller cities around the country. As newsroom size declined, the quality of the work declined too. Like for every journalist who is like the lead byline on a story, if it's a really important in-depth investigative piece, they might have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 journalists doing research work or basic copy editing work. Somebody else writes the headline. It's not all just the person on the byline who produces a story. Yeah. It's a very collaborative sort of workplace, and that's why I have a big heart for journalists. I love newsrooms. I love journalists as people because they're curious. They're grubby. They'll get up in your business.
Paparazzi-esque now.
Yeah, just to some degree though. Like
getting the truth.
Yeah, you have to have that kind of attitude and personality to make it in that business. And they're some of my favorite people in the world because they're just some of the best gossips. And, they've always kind of got the dirt on everybody.
Oh yeah, the scoop. We love a scoop.
Yeah, we love a good scoop.
I think this is a good place to kind of return to Tulsa now as like really a new landscape. You kind of mentioned this briefly before we started, but about how you've experienced Tulsa in kind of 3 different sectors, or I guess areas of your life. Like, kind of tell me a little bit more about your relationship with Tulsa and how it's changed.
Yeah, so I grew up here, so I was a child here, and then my wife and I moved back in 2017, and so we got an apartment on Cherry Street where we could walk to the farmers market on Saturday morning. So we were out, we were sociable, going to concerts and dining out, and just meeting and reconnecting with old friends and meeting new ones. And then we bought a house in 2019 and had a set of twins in 2020. So our Tulsa lives and our sort of perspective on Tulsa drastically changed again at that point. So now raising children here is kind of the new frontier that we're exploring, and we just love it. It's so great. We spend our weekends at Gathering Place and Discovery Lab and Philbrook, and it's just such a fun and edifying place for us to take our kids, and they're places that we like going, with them. We're not just taking our kids to Philbrook just, for their betterment. We end up bumping into our friends too, who either work there or members or just exploring for Saturday. Yeah.
And the Gathering Place is like,
oh my God,
truly a meet all for everyone. It's a place for gathering to be right on the nose.
Well, and the thing about Gathering Place that blows my mind is my kids are going to grow up not knowing Tulsa without it.
Exactly. I love thinking about that, just because it was like I experienced, almost 12 years of Tulsa without it. Mm-hmm. And I'm, only about 3 or 4 years of me living in Tulsa and having it. And like, I mean, it's pretty astronomical. Where I'm really excited to get someone from the Gathering Place staff to kind of come on and talk about that too. It's such a great asset for the city. But so many folks that I've had on have already shared like anecdotes about, an experience or an interaction they had there that they, if they were from Tulsa before they had it, they're like, well, where else would that interaction have happened if not for a place like the Gathering Place? So that's pretty cool. And I love this like parent perspective too. I think it's something we haven't really had too much on the podcast too. It's cool to know that, you don't lose yourself or lose all of the things that you do, pre-kids, post-kids, just because like the audience or the settings change, that there's still that frequency of interaction, that opportunity for interaction in places, and a lot of places being kid-friendly is huge, all that. So,
well, and being somewhere, in my case, that I grew up with, like, my parents were very active in volunteerism in Tulsa. My dad's worked here as a lawyer for close to 30 years now at this point. When I went in to interview for the Root job, I met with Ken Levitt very early on, and my dad remembers when Ken was an intern at his law firm, like 30 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just there are these very rich sort of these rich sort of connections that add new layers and nuance, over time. And, that is one thing that you kind of don't get if you uproot and move to another city.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful to my parents for the, kind of like the bedrock platform that they put in place here that, I now get to stand on and my kids, someday will too.
That's a great point. I also have it's not random connection, but I went to high school with Nathan, his son. So, and then we both ended up going to Ivy's. And one time I stayed with Nathan on his floor at Princeton during a conference. But it was like so interesting to then, 3-4 years later, come back and be, going to meetings with it at Atento and seeing Ken there. Those like threads that you're kind of mentioning, those threads of connection that just end up growing as you spend more time in a place. It's pretty unique to the place where you grow up and foster that sense of self and then opportunity, all of those things. So I'm going to pivot us a little bit more into kind of talking about Root. I'm really excited to talk about it because it's I would say it's a hot topic here in Tulsa, all of the amazing content that you guys create. But go ahead and share with our audience, a little bit of what Root is and an overview of what you do and how you do it.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the executive director of Root, the Insider's Guide to Tulsa. We publish events and guides, things to do in Tulsa. Broadly speaking, we're trying to help highlight maybe the harder to find or not necessarily obscure, but like not the most obvious things to do in Tulsa, which in my experience kind of turn out to be the things that like connect you more strongly to the city. We might not be leading the site with like every concert at the BOK Center because, the BOK Center has a marketing department. They've got a budget to let you know and, buy billboards whenever, Carrie Underwood or Bruce Springsteen or whomever is, coming to the BOK Center. But we're a little bit more interested in getting our users out and about and familiarized with not just the city itself, but its cultural institutions and the people who make things go, the small business owners, the event programmers, artists, chefs, the makers and doers of Tulsa. And so day to day, I manage a really skilled team. Kind of what unites us all is that we used to be journalists and really too, a lot of the work that we do day to day producing, Roots content, it is fundamentally, at its base, journalism work. Yeah. Alicia Chesser, for instance, who produces our newsletter each week. She used to contribute to the Village Voice in New York City when she lived there. And then of course she moved back to Tulsa and became a huge part of like the fine art dance community here. She's been a part of so many different artistic initiatives and endeavors over the years that she can kind of draw on that experience to then, produce our newsletter each week and really help sort of show people around and show them, hey, here's what's local. Here's what local artists are doing, as opposed to like traveling exhibitions or, things that may not necessarily be like, for excuse the pun, but like rooted, in Tulsa, if that makes sense.
No, that I love that. That's a great synopsis. I want to kind of highlight some things that I've gone to Root for. The guides are amazing. I love your guides. I'm looking at the guides list right now. There's the Essential Tulsa Brunch Guide, the 12 best coffee shops in Tulsa, 10 dive bars only real Tulsans know about, the 10 best picnic spots. I mean, I think really the breadth and depth of these articles and these guides specifically is, taking your interest and letting you have options, letting you know that there is your interest in the city and here's how you can go get involved in it. I mean, it being as almost like simple as that for me as a, young person navigating, kind of reconnecting with my city after quite a few years gone and then to, be able to explore new interest. All of those things are so important. And I think that Root does an amazing job of, like you said, kind of highlighting those bits of those events or things that might not have their own marketing team behind it. I mean, it's a huge asset to connecting this community in a lot of ways. I'd also jump in and say too that, like, I'm looking on here for the events that you guys have. Junior Roller Derby recruitment, which is this evening at 5:30. This is going to come out way later, but I'm sure the Roadkill Rollers Junior Roller Derby will still be going when you're listening to this. It's so cool to know that, like, you can really find a couple of different avenues for exploration on not only on your page but through your guides, through the newsletter. It's awesome.
Tulsa has a lot of niches, a lot of niche communities, and we want to get you connected to them. I'll say, on the guides, we kind of think of the guides as like Tulsa essentials, right? If you were relatively new to Tulsa, if you've only been here for a month or 6 months or even a year or two, these are kind of the entry level, get you started, get you familiar and about town. I meet once a month with my team, and they're also talented. And a lot of the work that we do in those meetings is, you kind of boil it down, and it's how to Tulsa. Yeah, like we're trying to show people how to be a Tulsan, like from our kind of understanding what our local cultural institutions are to what our big traditions are, and then kind of hopefully to the finer point stuff of getting you connected with a favorite brewery or a favorite restaurant or a favorite little niche in Tulsa, whatever that may be.
Yeah,
I'll admit it's kind of hard to measure the success of those things, because it's when someone comes to your website, we can see like that we've referred them out to an event, but I don't know who or how, or
and they're not reporting back to you.
Exactly.
All of that, yeah.
But one thing that I know, we work alongside the Tulsa Remote program, and obviously like the remoters are such a key population for us. But we were really excited to see that Brookings Institution study that came out a couple of months ago that found that Tulsa remoters on average reported like better quality of life here than other remote workers, which to me is like great. I think they reported that they felt more connected to their community.
Yeah,
which to me, like like the remote team does a great job of that. But what we really want to do with Root is hopefully get them out of just their remote pocket, right, and into the larger community. I want those remoters to meet like Steve Liggett, who runs Liggett Studio. That's been around for I don't know how many dozens of years in
making those organic connections to Tulsans that have been here or moved back here that are maybe not part of that Tulsa remote community, but and that's how you get integrated into the community by it becoming more than what you came in and saw it to be, a type of thing. I
want to blend those audiences.
Exactly. One of the guide that I wanted to highlight, and I think that this got a big highlight in a news story about this guy. I think it was Luke Lifesti was his name, who came into Tulsa and like did a bunch of things with all of his New York friends. I think they were heavily influenced by the How to Do Tulsa in Under 24 Hours guide, because they hit a lot of those things on there. But just some quick things from what to do are on this How to Do Tulsa in Under 24 Hours guide. You've got shop at Silhouette in Tulsa's historic Greenwood district, cozy up in the East Village, indulge in your tiki bliss at Saturn Room, dance at St. Vitus. Like, these are just some things that really look a lot like my Friday nights sometimes. So I'm glad that other people are being this is how I'm interacting with those people. They might be getting guided there from your content.
Oh, it's great to hear. Yeah, that used to be what my Friday night looked like. And then I got old.
I'm sure the twins might have just made you rethink that on Friday night.
Yeah, we're still working on getting, once we can get them to stay up past 8:00, then they'll be ready for Vitus.
Oh yeah, one of these days. I think a huge part of your content kind of going maybe into this year, and it's really something I've noticed this year, maybe because I hit that follow button on Twitter, but was and is your beloved and slightly unhinged Twitter account. Do you mind kind of telling us a little bit about maybe the renaissance of Root on Twitter. Attention web developers. Techlahoma is proud to present the 200 OK Tulsa Web Developer Conference on May 12th at the Holberton School, Tulsa, the must-attend event of the year for anyone in the field. This one-day conference features informative talks from leading experts in web development, design, and user experience. Learn the latest trends and techniques that will help you stay ahead of the curve and connect with other professionals in the industry. The conference is perfect for developers at any level, whether you're just starting out or have years of experience. You'll gain valuable insights that you can immediately apply to your work and career. And best of all, you'll be part of a vibrant community of developers who share your passion for web development. Don't wait. Register now at 200ok.us. That's 200ok.us. And join Techlahoma on May 12th at Holberton School, Tulsa for an unforgettable day of learning and networking.
Oh man, I've always wanted a fun Twitter account. Like Twitter to me has always been a fun space. Like it depends on who you follow and what you're looking for, but as a place to get in and quickly read the room on the topic of the day and see some funny jokes about it. It's you don't get that on Instagram or anywhere else. So
that's because their algorithm's all crazy.
Yeah. And Twitter and it kind of goes along with Root in some ways. Like Twitter is for the people who are kind of in the know, right? So we always wanted an account with that voice of somebody who is in the know in Tulsa, who has fun opinions, but also who is like a participant and who's curious and who is out and about and a participant in local culture. So I'll say I do not do the tweets. I get asked that a lot, and it's a guy named Zach. He used to do Twitter for Philbrook, but he is like just an insanely talented kind of man about town. If you know him, you love him. And he loves doing the account, and we text about it, pretty much every day. But I think in the last 6 months or so, we've really dialed in the voice to be this kind of like ground up, like from the audience kind of voice of Tulsa. That's both a champion for the city, but also deeply involved in its kind of day-to-day and activity.
There's definitely some satire involved. There's
a little bit.
The jokiness of it is really good. I'm gonna read some tweets, and this is a first for Grow With Us, reading tweets on air. One of them says, "Do not look directly at the penguin statues. They mistake eye contact as a threat and will attack."
We love the penguin statues.
That's a recurring joke on the Twitter account, and it's so funny. I think if you've been to Tulsa, you've seen a penguin statue or two, and I think you are always left with the question, why?
I get asked about the penguin statues. Anyone who ever comes to Tulsa for the first time, that's like one of the first questions that they ask.
Yeah, I truly can't. I think that there's one. I think there's multiple downtown, and then also just literally scattered all throughout the city for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Another one is a quote tweet of a tweet that says, "It's been 60 days since I've gone to a quick trip," and then Root quotes and says, "Yeah, I'm Tulsa sober." That one has 268 likes. That's a big hit. Didn't mean to tweet this, was trying to text this to my infant son. That one sounds like you could have tweeted that one.
I honestly, no. That's just how good Zach is.
And then, where's the love for First Wednesday? I'm gonna go downtown and crawl around on my hands and knees. See, some of these I love because it takes you to a place on Twitter where you don't know what they mean.
Yeah,
they don't mean anything specific or cryptic or whatever. It's just silly to consider why you would go and crawl on your hands and knees anywhere.
Funny images in Tulsa. Well, you know the backstory on the penguins, right?
I really don't.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Like, how much time do you have?
Please inform us.
Well, they were part of a fundraising campaign for the zoo in the 90s, I believe. I remember this from my childhood. Jesse is nodding and pointing. He's a real Tulsa savvy, Tulsa expert. But yeah, if I remember correctly, like kind of all these civic entities, chipped in and raised funds, and if you raised enough funds, like you got a penguin statue that you could decorate however you wanted. So the one of the police stations has a police penguin. I believe Ranch Acres has a penguin, if I remember. Or they did for a while.
Yeah.
There's one on Riverside.
That's the one I saw my whole life because I lived in that area.
Yeah, but it was fundraising for the zoo. So that
fits. Well, and now I'm like, and I've been to the zoo quite a bit of times recently, and I know that their logo doesn't have a penguin on it, so it's like, I guess it makes sense. Penguins, all that.
I think they were raising money specifically for the penguin
exhibit.
Habitat.
Yeah. Okay. That's so funny. I'll leave us on our Twitter conversation. Everyone go follow at Root Tulsa on Twitter. You'll get to see an amazing Twitter Avi, which is the Tulsa Driller with the cowboy emoji that is depressed. So the depressed cowboy emoji with a cigar, maybe a cigar hanging from his mouth, but he is sad.
Zach, who runs the Twitter account, a lot of it is just stuff that he and I, think to be funny. We just kind of believe it at a very base level. A lot of other people, especially if you've been in Tulsa for a long time or are new to Tulsa and Tulsa curious, you're either going to find it funny too, or have your interest piqued by it. In some cases, we see actual conversations bubbling up there. And one thing that I'm really proud of with the Twitter account is our ability to highlight, ground level, like grassroots stuff that's actually happening. Whether that's, author events put on by Booksmart Tulsa or, public civic engagement type stuff. We've had some ability to draw, public attention, I think, to this, grassroots level stuff that's happening, which that was always one of the kind of pillars that we had in mind when we started it.
That's awesome. I think Twitter's a great place to do that. I mean, as a person that checks Twitter maybe more times than I care to admit.
Right there with you.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately, any downtime is scrolling.
It's the new cigarette.
Yeah, well, which I'm glad. I don't know which one's healthier.
Probably the cigarette.
Yeah, maybe. I think kind of where we're heading with this conversation lends itself really well for us to kind of discuss how technology intersects with content, and it seems like that's something that is pretty important and apparent in the work of Root. So I don't know. Does that kind of bring anything to mind for you and kind of your vision for Root and how you guys have been operating with those two things in mind?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're in a new world. Certainly, even from the one that I learned about in college, at OU in 2008 to 2011. Like, I was in journalism school then, and some of the professionals who were teaching were drawing on their experience from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, technologies have disrupted so much of what that old model of day-to-day news and information consumption looked like. We're kind of in a new world, and I think when it does come to producing content, right, like the people who still work as journalists are kind of competing now with small businesses and marketers and designers and big corporate tech firms, all for the same real estate in like your Facebook feed or your Instagram feed or whatever. In my opinion, if we want to tell people the story of Tulsa, we have to tell it really well, and we have to tell it in a compelling way that like really connects with people as they're having their Twitter cigarette, so to speak. Just kind of casually scrolling, because it's hard to capture people's attention in that attention economy, especially when we when our goals with Root aren't quite so clear cut as like direct conversion for like a sales or marketing firm.
Yeah,
we just want you to learn about Tulsa because we on a very basic level trust and believe that once you do, you'll love it here and you'll want to stay here long term. I think that's something that the remote folks talk about quite a bit. Is we don't have a problem getting people to stay once they get here. It's getting them here in the first place.
Yeah.
That's kind of the trick.
Yeah, and I think that I want to take some credit with this podcast as being a little bit of a voice to kind of that experience, because so many people I've talked to a lot of sub-remoters on this podcast, and really anyone that has experienced Tulsa for the first time gives that perspective of like, it's this town in Oklahoma. It's in the middle of nowhere. I came from XYZ place, but when I got here, things clicked for me. I was able to step into this new version of myself, whether it was, professionally or, exploring personal connections in a different way. I'm not caught up in this hustle bustle of, maybe a coastal city or really just a larger, more dense city. It's kind of like you're able to slow down. I think someone the other day said that, when they came to Tulsa, they learned how to breathe. And I'm like, that is a lot of credit to us, but thank you. And I don't know. I think it lends a lot to what you're saying kind of about capturing people's attention and making sure that they know how to interact with the city. I think you can move to a new place, and that can be any place, and then be either over encumbered with opportunities, events, ways to get connected, ways to meet people, ways to network, or you can sit there and kind of insulate yourself in your own world or whatever, and be like, there's nothing here for me. So how do you meet people where they're at, whether it's they're getting too much information and they don't know how to narrow it down, or whether it's they don't think that there's any communities for themselves here and what they think they know about the city. How do you expose them to new things? And that's something I will give you guys credit for, because I feel like I really see the ability to navigate that in a very intentional way, like through your website, through your guides, and then also how that information is shared in both almost the meme format on Twitter, but then also like, this through newsletter, all that stuff. Just meeting people where they're at when it comes to what type of community they want to see and have access to.
Well, and it's also about telling, on some level, telling the story of Tulsa as it is.
Yeah.
It's hard to get stories about, queer arts programming, in like the national media when it's about Tulsa, right? Like, because it doesn't fit like the national media stereotype about Tulsa. This weekend, like Carl Jones, for instance, opening up the Center for Queer Prairie Studies, like, just down the street from this building and the Tulsa Artist Fellowship. That was huge. Like the number of people who were there and how excited everybody was, and like all the artifacts that, Carl and his crew had accumulated. Like, that's the kind of Tulsa that we want to help, connect people to and cover and display to some degree, because it's you're not going to find that, in the pages of the New York Times or what have you.
Yeah, and your latest newsletter today covering the Res Dogs casting call that happened this weekend. I mean, that's so something that is unique to this geography. There's not every Native community or Indigenous community wants to have a Res Dogs, and we have it, which I think we're really glad to have that in a unique and intentional way. And I really thought that the writer kind of captured that in a really authentic way about what it means to not only the city, but also the communities. Thousands of Indigenous people coming to Oklahoma. It's almost like it's symbolic in a lot of ways of like, all of the Indigenous history that is here. We're kind of creating a new version of that, or not a new version, but like a version that is more authentic to the people that are here and telling that story, and in a very similar way to what you're trying to do with telling the story of Tulsa.
And celebrating it.
Exactly.
Right? Like we're so glad and so happy to see, Sterling Harjo and the Res Dogs team having success. Like it would be one thing if it were just, like a cool show about Oklahoma, but it's a cool show about Oklahoma that's shot here, produced here, stars, Indigenous like actors. It's, like the scene is literally the res. Yeah. And on top of all that, it's having a massive success. Like it's hitting big. Like there's probably like a lesson to be learned there.
Yeah. And I hope we learn it and learn it well. Like you can succeed as an artist here. And I think I've listened to Sterling talk on a podcast just recently, and I think that he is very aware of the impact that he's having and his ability to be a connector of opportunities to other Indigenous folks. And I think that that's going to happen here in Tulsa. So I am crossing my fingers and supporting it as much as I can. I'd love to kind of round out this conversation just with like one last question, kind of, where do you see Root heading in the next couple of years, or, how is Root heading towards the future in terms of maybe content or structure, and really with whatever you're comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for asking, Evan, and thanks for your interest. It's been a blast working on this project for the last 6 years. And, right now we've hit this very comfortable point where we've got 7,000 newsletter subscribers. I think 13 or 14,000 Instagram followers at this point. We've built a pretty solid audience, and we've got kind of our beats down, and we know each week, what kind of information goes into what slot roughly. So for us, for the future, we're kind of looking inward right now. We're doing a bunch of surveys. I think it'll be closed by the time that this airs, but we got over 325 responses, which was like double what we were expecting, on a reader survey this week. And there are just so many great sentiments in it, both constructively critical, and also just like friendly and positive. It's been nice to see people vibe with the project, so to speak. But where we go in the future is going to look kind of deeper into refining Root as a platform for event discovery. But what I'm hoping to add on to it is more of an ability to do ground up Tulsa cultural work, to really be able to hopefully surface new artists and new small businesses and new entrepreneurs and new events programmers, and kind of use our existing audience channels to to syndicate to larger audiences, and to tell the world about when really, really cool things are happening in Tulsa, like Carl Jones this weekend with the Center for Queer Prairie Studies opening up. We want to fundamentally keep kind of doing the same thing that we're doing, but we want to level up the structure and invest more in the content production side, so that we can really get deep and get the stories behind these things. Like you said, the guy, like the 24 Hours to Tulsa guide, maybe informing like a national media piece about Tulsa. Like, coming from journalism, that stuff happens a lot.
Yeah.
People Googling what to do in a particular place, and following like an itinerary that they found, and then producing their own original work. In a lot of ways, we have the opportunity to kind of not rewrite it, but to craft our own narratives about Tulsa.
Yeah.
And hand those off to national influencers, to national media, to whoever out there has an audience. So which in turn allows us to shape those perceptions about Tulsa, so that hopefully people don't necessarily think of it as as a flyover kind of place anymore. That would be the goal.
Yeah.
How we get there and the strategy remains.
I'll leave it to you to figure out.
I'm gonna need some help. But all that kind of remains to be seen.
That's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that, and I think that gives our listeners just a really great overview of kind of what the purpose of Root is, and how it's going to keep growing, how it's going to continue to be the insider's guide to Tulsa, how it's shaping narratives and helping craft new ones, which is something I'm really passionate about. And I think that Tulsa has needed that, and it's going to continue to need that, because things are going to continue to change. And I will not speak for the city in saying that we are constantly misunderstood, but maybe we are.
Maybe a little.
Maybe we'd like to be understood. Last but not least, anything you want to plug, whether it's, Root channels, any ways that people could connect with you. And one thing I wanted to plug for you is actually you can go to roottulsa.com and add an event. It's a great way to get out and publicize your event. And
yes.
I'm sure you can kind of inform us on what that process looks like too. But
we've got an event submission form on the site. And we do syndicate our event listings information out to the Downtown Tulsa Partnership and to Visit Tulsa as well. So by submitting your event to us, you kind of get that added bonus. Subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on all the social media channels, because we're producing stuff there each week. Would like to just shout out to my team of people: Alicia Chesser, Zach Reeves, Mason Powell, Cassidy McCants. They all do Incredible work each week, and it's a pleasure to work with them. And also shout out to my wife, Margaret Black, who works at Domestic Violence Intervention Services and who raises our lovely children with me. It's like kind of being connected in Tulsa, like in kind of like the professional scene and in the way that we are. It's a real pleasure to get to hear like from her side, working in a different but still, like kind of connected sector, like, what they're all up to. We love being here, and we're really proud of, the city that Tulsa is becoming for us and our kids and our friends.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for being on this episode of Grow With Us. I really appreciate everything you've shared with me and our listeners.
Thanks, Evan.
For our listeners of Grow With Us looking for new opportunities, please join our talent network to stay in touch with our featured jobs and opportunities at Tulsa. You can visit our website at talent.intulsa.com. That's talent.intulsa.com. By joining our talent network, you will get access to our newsletter where you can stay up to date with our latest career advice, featured opportunities within Tulsa partner companies, and our placement success stories. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. Let us know what you think about how we're doing by rating and reviewing, and maybe sharing with a friend. Huge thank you to our editors at Rant9 Production and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.